Well, the legislature is really triggered now. The last video that we did just really hit people in the right spot. But there's been some confusion about what was said and what was not said. Dr. Bradley and I went through the bill, and we agree that there's a lot of issues with this, especially what we see going on. But the problem is, and which is why I'm not being more bold in what the bill is saying, and I'm asking lots of questions, why is the legislature unanimously voting to do the same thing that they did before? Give broad powers, completely unspecific powers, to work with and fund Homeland Security in searching our streets without saying what they're searching for. It's an emergency, or an emergency that they think, because of their psychic powers, might be coming up soon. We're giving them this ability and this power right now. Make sure we're going to be, again, putting the links in the description on how to read the bill for yourself. Read the bill, decide for yourself. We showed it there on the screen. And then also how to contact your legislators. And the legislature is using a lot, or some legislators are using some gaslighting techniques that we need to be aware of. And so we wanted to do this follow-up video on House Bill 16 that we spoke about. So I brought on Dr. Bradley. We weren't able to get to him last time, but I'm so glad that you joined us today, Dr. Bradley, from freedomsrisingsun.com. Thank you, Dr. Bradley.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And you know, I kind of come into this running gun battle a little bit late, I guess, with you've stirred up a firestorm that I kind of think the legislators, it's kind of like hit birds flutter in a way.
Yeah, and, yeah. Me doth think thou dost protest too much.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of feel like there's kind of a feeding frenzy going on with those that are responding, and they have taken it off tangent in some instances.
Oh, very
and
nice.
They're claiming literally that their intention was far different than what you had said in your video.
Yep, and we're going to get into that. I don't want to cut you off, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I want to remind everybody not to miss any future videos by clicking on the subscribe button, and then getting notifications by clicking on the bell. Also help to support the channel and also become a part of the solution, become involved with our action program by going to defendingutah.org and clicking on the join button and becoming a member today. But you're exactly right, Dr. Bradley. This very important thing is what they're saying was said is not what was said. And so it's very easy for them to use gaslighting techniques to blame the victim for being victimized, basically.
Well, and it's not just a legislator that has responded with, oh, here's what we really meant. And right. I support what they really meant if they really meant it, but why didn't they say it? So anyway,
yeah,
there have been others that have responded that, you know, you forwarded me some of the responses that have absolutely misunderstood also what was said, not only by you, but what is said in the bill.
Right.
And so the bill is a poorly written bill that's euphemistic. It's broad spectrum. It's kind of something that can be twisted and turned and spun any way anybody wants it. It would appear based upon the responses you're getting. So yeah. I think we ought to clarify some of those things. But as we do this, there was a judge in New York in 1866 that I always refer back to him when the legislature's in session. His name was Gideon John Taylor. And he wrote, he says, no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. And you know, it shouldn't be that way. The legislature should be there. They've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. They're from among us. They're our brothers and sisters, if you will, in this fight for liberty. I mean, that's the way that should be. And it should be a non-acrimonious relationship. But what happens all too often is that we get bills that ultimately come back and harming us. And you used an example in the video you had previously made about this, about a bill that was passed some years ago that the legislature, they didn't just wound us in the foot. It was almost a fatal flaw to the point that the governor could become a tyrant, and the unconstitutionality of what they did in the delegation of authority to create legislation and enforce that legislation is unconstitutional at every level. And specifically, the Utah Constitution prohibits that, even in emergency. Yeah. So when they pass this emergency kind of act that the governor can seize the reins and run with them and, let the horse have its way, whatever, all of that was unconstitutional. And what we saw in 2020 was the fruits of a poorly written bill that shouldn't just be modified, it should be completely redacted from the Utah Code because it violates the Constitution. So what we find in this particular case, what you presented, I watched it after the fact. I saw that you read right straight from the bill, and the bill says what it says. And what the legislators are coming back to us now is, they've pushed back, and they're saying, no, you fool, you misunderstood. And it's like, I misunderstood? You communicated poorly maybe or something, but they say it's so that firefighters that go out on fires will be covered by workers' comp. And sure, that makes perfect sense.
Ben McClintock, defending Utah, just hates the firefighters.
Yeah, well, I you know what? I used to do wildland firefighting. So I hate my own kind. My family has been involved in that for years. I still have current family members that are involved in it. And honestly, I have found firefighters, as a general rule, and I know there are exceptions, to be fine, upstanding individuals that are well motivated and everything. There would have been never any problem had the bill stated what the legislator is stating its intent was, and it was to provide workers' comp, in his words now, doesn't say it in the bill, for firefighters that go out on a contract basis. It brings in the Department of Homeland Security. There's
it makes new terms. It defines what a new thing is. And so I want to back up a little bit. I know it's important. We want to make sure that we get to the heart of the matter and what the new update is. But I just want to remind people what was said and what wasn't said. So the first thing I want to do is bring up. I want to share with everybody the Salt Lake Tribune. What was the thing that kind of spurred? They say, hey, what's going on here? The Salt Lake Tribune this has hit like the national news. They came out with this official editorial from the Tribune's editorial board that claiming that the leaders have surrendered to COVID pandemic. And then we go down to one of its closing remarks. It says, were Utah a truly civilized place, the governor's next move would be to find a way to mandate the kind of mass vaccination campaign we should have launched a year ago, going as far as to deploy the National Guard to ensure that people without proof of vaccination would not be allowed, anywhere. Okay. So that was the first thing. That was kind of like what I started off with. I said, I wanted to report on this. And I said, I asked the question. I didn't say this is what's going on. I asked the question. I said, is this what the legislature is doing with a bill, HB 16? I didn't, I even mentioned, I said, a lot of times when we talk to legislators and we say, this is what the language of the bill says, and they'll come back and they'll say, well, that's not the intent. And I mentioned, the intent is not what a judge will rule on or have his opinion on. That's not how the police will enforce it. They're not going to go do a poll of what everybody that voted on it thought that the bill did. They're going to look at the language of the bill. And so that's what what I didn't say is I didn't say exactly what it did. I said, does it do this? Could it do this? I asked the question, could it? And I invited every one of the viewers to read the bill themselves, leaving a link, reading through the bill, as you mentioned, myself, to the audience so they could read along with me, and then a link to read it on their own. And then I said, read it on your own, answer the question for yourself, and let your legislator know how you feel about it. That's what I said. And so, what is being then after that, though, of course, the legislature is gaslighting and claiming all kinds of conspiracy theories, as opposed to what I stick to as conspiracy facts, and then gaslighting individuals. And then some individuals took what I said, the questions that I asked, and took it as an inference that wasn't made by me. And so that's why I want to make this clarification video, because a lot of, I think, honest misunderstanding from viewers happen, and then purposeful twisting of what I said is being done by some legislators, which I want to cover as well.
Well, and the fact that you had, and I'm confident I have not seen all the commentary that's come out on this, but some of the things that you forwarded to me clearly indicate to me that those that have looked at the bill, these are regular everyday folks like we are, that have made some assumptions from the bill. Mm-hmm. And one of those that I saw had to do with FEMA and CERT, these community teams that can go in on disasters. And honestly, those kinds of organizations, volunteer individuals in your community, you could have them maybe in your church, that if there's a hurricane or a earthquake or something, go out and help kind of dig through the rubble. And that is not inferred here. These are agencies. No. These are agencies. These are not volunteer helpers.
And they're new ones, because as we look at the bill itself, which I'm showing right now, for some reason, I'm having a hard time doing oh, here we go. Okay. Is that it's not CERT. There's an emergency response team, right? Response team. And it has actually a new definition for what a response team is. And so if this was CERT, then they wouldn't have to add new language defining what it is. And this is the definition of the emergency response team is not what CERT is. Am I correct on that statement, Dr. Bradley?
Right. CERT is not what's defined here. But, you could say, oh, okay, if you have a private agency that is going out on a wildland firefighting expedition, then they could be that if they had an agreement. But if you'll carefully, I know you, Ben, have carefully read it, maybe what should happen is that those people that are trying to get to the bottom of this as just regular citizens, if they'll carefully read it, they will not find a single reference to a wildland firefighting experience. They will not.
I'm going to show that right. I'm going to show that right here. I'm going to type in the search for the page. I'm going to type in the word fire. Okay. So they have, notwithstanding, so this is already in the code. So this isn't new code right here. Let's go. Nope, that's not new. That's already in the code, and already in the code. So any reference to wildfire is already in the code.
Correct. It's not being written in by any means. And this is the wording that's in there now obviously has been misunderstood if in fact what the makers of the bill are telling us is true. It has been misunderstood by people that have read it. Mm-hmm. And if in fact it can be misunderstood that way, I believe that it's a poorly written bill. It's written euphemistically, it's written in broad terms, it's written in something that it would be very easy for someone to say, wait, why are they being so difficult understood? We have wording that is so broad spectrum. It is so almost evasive. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. If you write bills that have poorly understood wording in there, they can be misinterpreted. I sat through a trial one time. Yeah, I was not on trial, but I was very interested.
Not yet, anyways.
Yeah, I was very interested in the outcome of the trial. And the wording of the actual law was so euphemistic. It was so broad brush. It was so easily twisted and turned. Multiple meanings could come out of it. And the defense team wanted the judge to give a copy of the law to the jury. Boy, the prosecution team absolutely were death on that idea. And here's the idea. If the prosecution was worried about it, they were worried that the jurors may say, how could the defendant have understood this? I mean, we don't understand it.
There's actually a legal term called void for vagueness. That's a legal term that is used in courts of law that people can use as a defense, because the legislation or the code is so vague it is impossible to understand and is void for vagueness. So that's the thing.
And that's exactly what should have happened. Had I been on the jury, I would have said, Judge, while we're in our deliberations, I need a copy of the law. And you will have a hung jury if you don't give us that. And then the jury could have read it and said, holy cow, all of us interpreted this a different way. So that's the concern I have about this bill. The vagueness of it infers an effort to hide a meaning. There may be no intention at all whatsoever to hide the meaning. It may have just been poorly written. It may be.
The response in the gaslighting, I think, says otherwise, but that's what's it called? Not speculation. That's my analysis of the situation, without, being a mind reader. That's just what it seems, as they are being completely triggered and completely emotional. We're going to get into that in a minute, but I think it's good for us to go through here and look at what it is. Again, go through the lines of the bill, because again, how you read a bill right here, this is all current code. This is all being deleted because it's struck through if the bill passes. And then underline means it's new language. Okay. So this is definition of terms. This is what is an emergency response team. What does that mean? It's an individual as a member of an emergency response team. That's kind of redundant, and acting with the course and scope of the individual's duties for an emergency response team. And then the agency means an entity that executes a memorandum of understanding with the United States Department of Homeland Security to organize a national urban search and rescue response system task force. That has nothing to do with firefighters. Am I correct?
Well, here, there are task forces that could be organized. Let's say for Hurricane Katrina came through and they.
Oh, and that went real well. Nobody's rights were violated with that.
Well, no, and that was probably
a disaster,
because we know that really didn't turn out happily ever after.
Right, but and I don't mean just a natural disaster. It was a natural disaster for people's rights.
That's exactly what I was. But let's say California had a big fire, whatever.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, there could be a task force sent out to respond to that. Okay, but so yes, there could be people that were called to do that, and it's well within the realm of possibility. And in fact, task forces have gone from the state of Utah to assist in disasters. But the point of the matter is that if it really was just for workers' compensation, why doesn't it say that? Why don't we say that we will be funding a process by which our firefighters or our task force responders or whomever they are will be covered by workers' comp when they go out in the field? I mean, it's a simple phraseology, a sentence or two, instead of this around the horn and down the way. And so the vagueness is what makes it seem like there's an elusiveness to this that was purposely written into it. And
because this could apply to more than just firefighters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well. It could go across a lot of boards, first responder, who knows? But the fact of the matter is, we don't know what they mean with this. They're saying that a task force could be created and the Homeland Security people would be involved in it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so what does that mean?
That's definitions. So yeah, let's look at what that means by going into, okay, what does this do? So the division may enter into agreement with the sponsoring agency to establish terms and conditions that apply to an emergency response team. Okay. Break that down for us, Dr. Bradley.
Well, I don't know. That's the problem I've got, is that we may enter into an agreement, and it's just so to establish terms and conditions. So it doesn't say what the terms, which again goes into the broad aspect of it, right? It doesn't show intent of anything other than agreements can be made, and we just don't know.
It doesn't say what the agreements, but it doesn't even say what the agreements might be.
And that's the problem. Is I from what I've read on some of the responses, you were kind of accused of being precipitous and jumping to conclusions and all sorts of conspiracy theory. Well,
right.
The fact of the matter is that you didn't speculate about what, there was, what does this mean? But nobody can tell us from those words what it means. And if they have an intent, see, people, Thomas Jefferson was a great believer in the idea that law should be easily understood by the common person.
Mm-hmm.
And the Constitution is, by the way, and all of the things that they created in the original foundational years of this nation, they were written for common folk to understand.
Right.
And what has happened in recent years, all the legalese and the whys and wherefores and be it hereby enacted and blah, 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 all of this kind of stuff is to the point that the common folk are being kind of, I think, either purposely misled or there's some reason that it's being held above the heads of the people. And when the people come to distrust the law, they become enemies of the law. And who would have known here 5, 6, 7 years ago when the legislature gave the governor sweeping powers that are unconstitutional, specifically precluded in the Utah Constitution, of course, in the United States Constitution, that we would have the egregious violations that happened in 2020, where the governor became judge, jury, and hangman.
If we had done a video on that 2015 bill and said, now the governor can shut down your church whenever they want and shut down your business and shut down parks and make it so you can't have dinner with more than 10 people, we would have been thought of as insane, and all the same accusations that we're hearing now and more probably would have been hurled at us. And yet in 2020, the bill that they passed in 2015 was used for those very exact things.
There's no question about that. So here's what I would say. The bill's poorly written, if it is intended as the maker of the bill has responded. So fix it. I mean, the firefighters and whomever. Say again?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with you. Let's just fix it, because I want to share again, just kind of, it's not a very long, right? Let's go to one more paragraph. If the division enters into an agreement described in subsection 1, the agreement shall allow the division to reimburse the sponsoring agency. So that's not workers' comp. That's just saying that, the agency agrees to pay for the things involved in the agreement. So, but whatever the agreement is, that's the vague part. This is pretty simple and straightforward. Scott?
Let's just make this so that common folks see what your real intent is, because someday a judge is going to see this thing for the very words that they're written in. Words have meanings. Those meanings can be known. The meanings of these words are euphemistic and ephemeral at this time. They're out there in the ether. It's like, what are they really intending with this thing? Let's be specific.
Here's the only section referring to workers' comp. And so I think a lot of these things where they say this is just about workers' comp for firefighters is really gaslighting. Because, okay, sure, technically you're right. That is a part of the bill. Well, workers' comp is part of the bill. But it's only a small portion. Well, it's only, I don't know about small, there's not a whole lot. It's only about half of the new language. And so it's gaslighting, and it's a distraction away from what the rest of the bill actually says and gives power to. And so it seems, disingenuous to only focus on those lines that talk about compensation and claim it's only for firefighters and ignore the other parts. Dr.
Well,
Bradley?
if the makers of the bill are saying this was brought to us by firefighters that saw that they were kind of at risk when they went on some of these activities, I'm saying, great. Let's take care of that. Let's fix it.
Yeah.
But the devil is in the details all the time. And if there's details in there that could be misinterpreted, misconstrued, or even used against the people, I would say, let's fix those words and let's just put this with a specific enactment for what they claim that they were approached by these firefighters to take care of a problem that had left them at risk. I'm fully in support of that. But all of these other things that apparently people that responded negatively to your video, so they weren't on your side. They were saying you're wrong. This is, but they misinterpreted what the bill said. So if they could do it, a jury could do it, a judge could do it, an attorney could twist it. Let's give specific and let's just take care of what you're trying to take care of and quit beating around the bush with things that may or may not ultimately come down and bite us.
Yep. So let's talk about some of those responses from legislators specifically. Let's kind of focus on that. This is a message that was forwarded to us from a constituent of Senator Bramble from the Provo area. And instead of like actually, addressing anything, he just says, enjoy your conspiracy theories and have a great day. And then, you have this response about Hurricane Katrina, which we mentioned just a minute ago.
Oh.
And so Bramble says, by the way, do you even know Ben McClintock's real name or where he lives? You've at least reinforced the stereotype of his ardent worshipers. And then he repeats the same exact thing again instead of actually addressing anything. So he doesn't address the issue. That's the first sign of somebody that is hiding something. He acts as if, a person's name that's reporting on the issue and where they live is relevant to the language of the bill. That's gaslighting. That's a distraction. That's making sure that you are on the defensive. And because he's on the defensive, he's wondering, is he going to get caught in what he's doing, whether this bill does something horrible or not. He wants to try and discredit somebody instead of discrediting the person, instead of discrediting the message. If he had focused on discrediting the message and focused on the language of the bill and proved what I'd said was wrong, which I didn't even claim anything. I asked questions, first of all, but he focused on trying to discredit the messenger, which to me says that he's on the defensive and that he feels threatened and can't actually defend himself. Dr. Bradley?
What we're really seeing here is ad hominem attacks. Basically, people are out of gas in their position. They don't have a position that's defensible, basically, when they resort to ad hominem attacks. An ad hominem attack is a personal attack. Oh, you're ugly. Oh, I don't like, I don't like your baseball cap. I think you're fat. Something, by the way,
that's not your name.
I'm not trying to cast those aspersions upon you, Ben.
Well, if the shoe fits.
Here's the deal. If they resort to those kind of attacks, you can be absolutely certain that their foundation of their argument is very weak. And in fact, what they've done is they've come to the point that they don't have any defensive position.
Right.
And so they basically attack a messenger. And while I may be too old or too ugly or whatever, I don't have a good command of the King's English, whatever it is, that has nothing to do with the issue at hand.
Right.
And so an ad hominem attack, people, you can take this to the bank. If people start resorting to those kinds of arguments, they're out of gas and there is just nowhere they've got left to go, and you've won. So that to me.
The one thing that I'm disappointed in is I want to know where these ardent worshipers are. I've been looking for my ardent worshipers and they're just not showing up. So, but I'm really glad to hear that I have some worshipers, but it's pretty funny that that's what he goes for.
No, it really is one of those weak positions to be standing on. They've fallen through the thin ice at that point. So now I had not seen these. You didn't forward me all of the dialogue that had been going on, but I did see a few of the things. And that's why I mentioned that there was confusion from people that were even looking at the bill and saying, well, this must be that.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, I didn't read it that way, but you did. And that means there's confusing points in it.
Right.
So
let's go to the sponsors of the bill and what they said. This is just a copy and paste from an email that I got on the subject. Okay. So this is Jim Dunnigan, the House sponsor, says the YouTube video is full of misinformation. I don't know what's misinformation. I read it and asked questions. The bill had 2 committee hearings. I guess, okay, you could say that was misinformation, but let me stop there, right there, because I think that deserves an explanation, a response from me. Let me just go to the back here. Here's the bill website and status. We have here, this is what it went through. These are the actions in the House and the Senate and other actions, okay? This is where in 9 times out of 10, and we're going to say, I'm going to just kind of show you right here, status. That's a bad bill, I guess, a bad example. Status, right? Voice, So a lot of these things are going through committee are going to the floor without bills. So usually this is actually a rare thing that I'm coming across. Right here, okay? It's the committee hearings that they go through. This will list the committees that it went to and the vote on that committee. So he's saying that it went through 2 committee hearings. It wasn't listed as an action that happened on the bill. It happened during the interim session. So that's a correction that it did go through committee, but in the interim session when nobody's watching, when it's easy to slide things under the table, and then it wasn't listed on the actions taken on the bill. So I guess my bad on that one.
Issue a retraction, Ben, because it did go through, but your point is well taken. In an interim committee, and particularly some of the things that happened in those days, there's very little exposure to public vetting. You know, they kind of slide through. It's a kind of a perfunctory, cursory kind of thing, and they run them through. So, but you know, okay, so it happened a year ago, maybe not quite a year ago, but it happened in an interim meeting.
Yeah.
So okay.
Probably 6 months ago, I'd imagine.
Make a retraction then. Say, okay, it did happen months ago.
It had a hearing. It just wasn't listed on the actions taken on the legislation.
Okay, so my bad, right?
Apologize. Yep.
So that's the point, is that there's a lot of recriminations on this, and you need to kind of sort them down through and ultimately say, is it a good bill or bad bill? Is the wording right? Is it
right? It is again a distraction because that's not really associated with the bill itself. I mean, it's kind of silly. But he goes on, he says, which the public was included during the interim meetings. It's evident the maker of the YouTube does not understand either the legislative process or the bill itself. Well, I asked questions. I understand how the process works. I know that there are interim sessions. I know, but they didn't include it. And it wasn't exactly an easy thing to be able to go find in the background, because there was in the interim sessions, there are no bill numbers. So to be able to go back, it's not exactly the easiest thing in the whole world. The bill was brought to me from some Utah firefighters. If that's the truth, that's fantastic. The bill provides benefits for our firefighters while responding to a disaster. When our firefighters are called out of state to help a natural disaster under the Emergency Response Task Force, their workers' compensation benefits, if they get injured, will be covered by the feds. So let's address that, Dr. Bradley.
Well, if what they were trying to do was correct a deficiency in that particular area, fine. But don't say it says what it doesn't. Yeah,
because that's again only the last paragraph or so that covers that.
Right.
If ever activated as a state disaster task force, which happens maybe once every 10 years, they do not have workers' compensation coverage. Again, distraction. The bill provides that if a firefighter is injured while working on the emergency response task force in the state of Utah, they'll provide workers' compensation. So that's where they're focused on with that.
Fully support that idea. Let's go forward. Take all of the other extraneous language and deep six it, make it clear, and let's go forward.
And then here's Mike McKell, the Senate sponsor. Our firefighters absolutely should receive workers' compensation. Nobody said they shouldn't. I've never heard such wild conspiracies. What's the wild conspiracy that you heard? I asked questions. Whoever is spreading the misinformation about this bill should be embarrassed. Our firemen will never be called out to search for unvaccinated people. That is an insane argument. So was it insane to say that the governor would never shut down churches and businesses and never allow, shut down your ability to be able to congregate in groups more than 10? That was probably insane in 2015. And so it's, again, gaslighting to say that it's insane to say that, that would ever happen, because obviously these people are power hungry and will stop at nothing to concentrate more and more of their power.
Well, let's go back to that Gideon John Taylor statement. We shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't be so skeptical. We shouldn't be so concerned about it. But we've been bitten, I guess I should say, so many times no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. You know, Thomas Jefferson wrote, let no more be said of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief with the change of the Constitution. That is what the basis of free people are, eternal vigilance. And this idea that we've got to be watching, if in fact, maybe sometimes we get all wrapped up around the axle, and when we know the whole story, we say, okay, fine, we're good. But when you read the plain English words and they can be twisted so many different ways, it's a concern. Let's be more careful.
So I think that's the final message is read the bill yourself. As you garner your own opinion, write to your legislator about that bill. And this bill specifically, and this is where I think I'm at. I think where you're at, Dr. Bradley, is if it's only about compensating Utah firefighters when they're called to fight fires out of state. Sure, if they get injured
or in state, I don't care.
State, they should have workers' comp. That's fine. But it appears to be a broadly worded bill that could grant more power. Because it's broadly worded.
Yeah.
Are we on the same page there, Dr. Bradley?
Yeah, we are. Let's narrowly focus for where it needs to be.
If this, we should, if we can just narrow it down and be very specific, then that's fantastic, and we can move on. But as currently written, it is so broad that it is a concern, just like the 2015 emergency powers turned into something in 2020. Let's make sure that can happen here. Let's learn from our mistakes, on both sides. Legislature, let's make sure we don't give more power than we want to. Let's be very clear and just make an amendment. And if it's all about just workers' comp for firefighters, I'm not going to complain. I think FEMA and the Homeland Security are unconstitutional, but that's kind of almost beyond at this point with just focusing on the firefighters to helping do firefighting. Fabulous.
Excellent.
So do you have time to talk about a couple more bills?
Actually, I've got another appointment I've got to go to, and I really ought to be leaving.
Okay.
Probably 5 minutes ago.
Then we'll wrap it up. Dr. Bradley from freedomsrisingsun.com. Go check it out. Make sure you go to his webinars every Thursday evening at 7:00 as well. You can sign up for those at freedomsrisingsun.com. And then just appreciate everybody, and make sure that you don't miss another video by hitting on that subscribe button, hitting on that bell to get notifications, and then joining with us in our work to be able to restore lost liberty by going to defendingutah.org and click on that join tab. Become a member today, support our efforts, support this channel, and then become involved. I'm Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org, and we'll see you next time.